I initially went to school for philosophy, and I found it like stifling and irrelevant, and I have a deep need to be relevant. So I started working at the newspaper and loved it, and then started working at the magazine and loved it more because you could be more writerly than in like hard news. And so I did that, and I loved it, but then I again felt stifled by living in the Midwest for 21 years. So I bought a one-way ticket to Prague, and that somehow got me to Korea, which somehow got me to China and Nepal and the Indian Himalaya, and then through continental Europe and Turkey and England, and now here. So it was about 3 years between my university and New York. And now I've been here a year somehow, and I'm writing a book that is equally about how to run a business and how to find meaning in your life. And I'm astounded and deeply grateful that the far-flung dots of my experience seem to be connecting. To observe the music, the mouthfeel of language, book reviewers will sometimes say that like a novel is toothsome. If something is really well written, then the reading experience, you will like taste it and you will feel it. There's interesting research about how if you images and like sensory descriptions, different like similes and metaphors, actually activate like the sensate parts of your brain. And so there's like all these different ways to form memories within the reader. And I think that's really like the music of memory formation, that writerly.
Why do you like that?
Because it's all of my favorite tastes. It's like peanut butter meets chocolate meets ice cream. I just try to read everything written about them, and if they write, to read what they've written, and to find what it is that we have deeply in common. And I think that's a great point of departure. And then to be really sensitive to the threads that emerge within a conversation, and to like those threads will lead to knots, and you untie those knots, and they'll lead to more threads, and then there's this whole constellation of lived experience that comes out, and it can be surprising and insightful, and at its best, it's a sort of intellectual, emotional intercourse. It's a joining of two bodies, and it's euphoric. Like some of my peak experiences have been interviews that I've done. What would I ask myself? I'm preoccupied with the way that one's interior life is manifested in the work that one does. I think that's like, I think when we talk about creativity, that's sort of a euphemism for the channeling of psychic energy. And I'm saying that like in a psychological sense rather than like a New Age sense, although I also kind of dig the New Age sense. But it's like the current of psychic energy, like your experience of life, brought into some sort of shareable format to like conquer the separation that we think that we feel. And so I would ask myself about how when I feel I am most deeply satisfied with the work that I'm doing.
So when do you feel that you're most deeply satisfied with the work that you're doing? Is that the right question?
Yeah. I think it's when it's deeply meaningful to me, and it also is pushing the boundaries of my skill set. So if I feel like I'm growing technically, I guess you would say, and professionally, as well as it being in alignment with my ideals. Well, writing a book, if you've never written a book before, or using challenging the conventions, because if you write a ton, you start to notice yourself leaning on similar rhythms of syntax, and to recognize those rhythms of syntax and be like, no, I am a free person. I am not a slave to my own habits. I'm going to do something new, and that's hard. And also, I think that's the job of an editor. A great editor is someone who can help you, can recognize where you are, and be like, and where the story is, and be like, well, why don't we need a little bit more of this and a little bit more of that, and can help you articulate the route, I guess. It's a kind of there's this rhythm between, in Buddhism, there's a rhythm between study and practice. At the end of the road, study and practice are the same thing. If you are, in Arhat, if you are a few steps away from becoming enlightened, your study is your practice. It is meditation in its many forms. But for everyone else, you study in order to extinguish your ignorance, and be able to sort of tell yourself, to guide yourself of what is happening. And then practice is more experiential. And the more you study, the better that you can practice. And the more that you practice, the more aware of yourself, and you can you actually study better as well. Sort of antecedent to write, especially as a reporter, is the finding of information, right? And so, for me, I've been reading a lot more and delving into psychology studies and getting a firm grasp of what's breaking, what's news in occupational psychology or organizational psychology or cognitive science, and paying attention to those trends, because it's if it's news here in this specialized field, and there's an avenue for me to be able to popularize that, if it's super valuable in that more esoteric place, and I can make that esoteric knowledge consumable to a popular audience, then that's great. That's really what I'm looking for. Sometimes people reach out to me, and a lot of times I'll reach out to them. I mostly talk to entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. I'm talking to VCs is fascinating for me, because I think our work is similar in that it's trying to understand trends, trying to understand what the signal is, what the predictors are of growth in its many forms, and they also just tend to be people who have done a lot of stuff and have wisdom accumulated, and that's the best thing. Whenever you can pick the brain of a wise person for an hour, that's a treasure. Similarly, entrepreneurs are experientialists, are really, really, really doing things, are kind of extreme forms of humanity. And that's a wonderfully interesting psyche to explore, and to again see that rhythm of interior life and exterior life. I think is if someone is really exceptional and amazing. I think it's really kind of an aesthetic experience. It's similar to, I remember the first time that I walked into the 5th floor of MoMA, and there's Starry Night is on the opposite, like you walk in and then there's this huge crowd of people on the opposite side of this freestanding wall. And you're like, why are all these people standing there? It's because Starry Night's right there. And there's also like these Cezannes and Gauguins. It's like an aesthetic overload, and you can feel, like when you're in front of like a Kandinsky, like you feel something meaningful, and that's like much faster than your than sort of your coarse cognition. And so when I get that feeling, that's signal, like that's what I act on. Yeah, and then I try to pursue it swiftly. Who could provide breakthroughs? I think really what I want to create in the mind of my reader is epiphany and appreciation. And someone who has these things integrated into his or her life. That's really what I want to kind of curate. Well, I think you have to aesthetically... I think aestheticism is a sort of receiving of phenomena. And so an aesthetic interview is one in which you fully receive the person that you're with and like hold space for them and like make them, it's safe there. You want to have it be a safe place, and that's how things get shared. And this is all happening like at a very subtle level. So I think like if you have like this energy, if you approach a being, such as an interview subject, in the same way that you approach Cezanne's Peaches, and you're there and you're like looking, and you realize, oh, he left some of the canvas open as like a comment on, you like read the museum text, and it's like, oh, he left the reserve as a comment on the process of painting. And, oh, this corner of the table is purposefully out of perspective. So if you have that same aesthetic sense, then you start to notice the fibers of a person. Like you get a higher resolution. I think the more sense of aestheticism, sometimes asceticism, but the more aestheticism that you bring to an interaction, the more subtly you can experience it. I think if you can describe someone, if you can describe a person, if you can describe them to themselves in a way that they've never heard, and be able to express their ideas and their identity in a way that's new to them, that's like a kind of a burst, right? I think that's something to be looking for, to be able to like readily summarize and really like participate, and even before that, again, like to do all the homework, to research things, to like try to understand the way that they relate to the world. Try to understand their habits, like what makes them exceptional, and then to be like really, really free once the interview begins. Like the best interview is a conversation, is where you're not looking at your notes at all. I had this PR person who was party to a conversation I had with a venture capitalist a while ago, said that she felt like she was interloping upon two old friends catching up, and that was like that's like the highest compliment I can get as a practitioner of journalism. I think clarity again springs from meaning, worthwhileness. As Phil Libin, the CEO of Evernote, said to me, is if it's something sufficiently epic to be worth doing. And so I think if you have a sense of your work being sufficiently epic, that really makes it clear. And if you also get a sense for how much each day connects to your life and to how like little by little everything is, how like the kind of the like Sisyphean ecstasy of the grind, of just being like devoted, that is really it's like being married. A friend of mine said effectively that it was like I was married to my vocation. And I think, and that's a great ally to have, because you get to take the volatility that you would have if you didn't have, and this again relates to clarity. If you don't know what it is you are to do, if you're not committed to what you're doing, then you spend a lot of energy on trying a lot of different things, and that's like your volatility, and like a human can only handle so much volatility. But if you have committed to something, then you can like channel your whole capacity for volatility into the work itself, and that's how you innovate, that's how you do new things, that's how you can really push yourself to the limits. You can do deliberate practice. You can push yourself to the limits of your potential. And so when I have that pushing feeling, that like now I identify that as a signal of clarity. It's like the technical exertion wed to the teleology of it, the goal, the meaning, the purpose. It's so, to put it much more simply, when right effort meets right purpose, you have clarity.